Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to In Process Podcast. I am your host, Leslie, and I am with my wonderful friend and sister, Miss Alexandra McCrory. Welcome.
Hey.
So, y'all don't
Thank
even
you for
know.
having me.
Yes, no, I am honored to have you here. Y'all, this has been like, we have had conversations about this podcast. You know I was gonna do this, and I am so excited that Ali said yes to being on this podcast. It is such a joy and such an honor to have you on, Ali. And you all, I am not an artist in the sense of painting and drawing and all of those things, but I have been blessed to just witness how the Lord has blessed Ali to be so gifted in this area. And
Yeah.
I have been amazed at her journey. And so, for this episode, I just want us to lean in to hear more of Allie's story. And I'm going to read some of her bio and we're going to go from there. But y'all, it's going to be so much fun. I'm so excited to just dig in. But you all, so I call her Allie. She goes by Allie with her friends and family, but her name is Alexandra McCrory. And she is a freelance graphic designer and illustrator living and working in the Chicagoland area. She also has her own business called Alley Ray's Design, and she believes that in order to chase out the darkness in an unlit space, we need to bring light that brightens the space wherever its rays reach. That is the goal, to create meaningful rays of light through design. I love that so much. And I would just love for you to just share, Ali, how did you get into art? Is this
hmm
something that like you always knew you wanted to do and be? Like, I would just love to hear your journey into this.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like there's kind of like two stories I can tell with that. There's the historical story, and then there's just like the plain old me story. I'll start with the plain old me.
Yeah.
I love art. I just truly love color. Um, I think art speaks to me in a really cool way. Like when I was younger, I was like, okay, like I don't know, um, like how do I express like how I'm feeling? And then like truly like going for a walk outside and seeing like God's art, it's like, oh, like I think I'm like peaceful like a bird, or I think I'm this like this, or like growing like a tree. And I think I speak through images, and so it lends itself to me kind of then becoming an artist. And so I can be like, oh yeah, like I love to draw and I love to just express myself through that. But I think the historical version of, of that story is that I come from a family of artists.
Mm.
My grandma and my grandpa were both artists. My grandpa actually shared his faith through art when he first got saved. Like he used to ride a motorcycle, and he was, came to the Lord, and then took his white motorcycle helmet and designed it with the gospel, and then like
Wow.
would go into some of those same bars that he would like usually go to before he was saved, and then spread the gospel with art. And then my mom, he inspired my mom, and my mom went to school for art, and then became a teacher but used art in her lessons. And then the same on my dad's side. And so like I didn't know all of that like when I
Yeah.
became an artist, but then like going back into my family history, I'm like, oh, like it is like this kind of like really cool woven story that like each layer of like generation has become more and more stuffed into that artist zone. And so I feel like it's a really cool progression into me becoming like a full-time artist, because they all like had their small part in the art world. And then yeah, so
Yeah, that's
yeah.
incredible. I didn't even know that. I'm like, okay, all of these like generations, like the Lord has just like blessed y'all with these gifts. So you said a full-time artist, and you have Ali Ray's design. And so can you share more just of how you got into being a full-time artist? I mean, I'm imagining that was a huge leap of faith. Um,
hmm
to go into that direction. And so what led you to take that step of faith?
yeah. Oh, girl, that was not an easy decision at all. Oh man, it really was actually a hard one that I had to pray into and fast about for quite some time. I
Mm,
think I started off my career in college. I loved art all the time, but it was always going to be a hobby. And then I started taking some art classes, you know, when I was in junior college, and I was like, oh, like, you know, I'm going to transfer out for business or for history. I'll just take some fine art classes. And I just like fell in love with it, and I fell in love with the process of it, and I fell in love with actually the business side of it, of like selling art and like really using it as an asset to generate money, but also to like generate stories and push the wealth of not only the Black community but the Christian community, and how like churches were using it. And I was like, wow, this could actually be something. But it's still a hobby. It's still always going to be a hobby. That was me. It's like always going to be a hobby.
Uh-huh.
And so I was like, okay, I like fine art, but how do I mix fine art and business? And so I was like, I'll go into graphic design, which, by the way, when I went to Trinity for that, I did not know any graphic design. I just knew fine art and painting and all of the quote unquote classic arts. And I had dabbled in photography and some digital editing, but not like graphic design, what I do now. And so when I went into school for it, I was like, well, for sure, now it's just going to be like a hobby. And maybe like I'll work in like a studio where I can kind of do like two different worlds of it. Like, so there's like in-house studios where I'll work for a company. I'll have a full-time salary, but I'm like working on one specific part of design for business. And so as I got into the software and that digital side of the arts, I became even more in love with it. And I was like, I really love, again, the expression of being able to tell not only my story but other people's story through digital artwork. And that could be in the form of a logo, but it also can be in the form of a mural, and it can be in the form of, you know, a greeting card, and coloring books for kids, and illustrating a beautiful story, and coming alongside authors. And I was like praying through this, and I was like, Lord, how do I find a studio that aligns with all of these visions, not visions, but excuse me, these goals that I feel like you've actually given me, which is to tell other people's story, and to shine a light on that. And he's like, just keep praying, just keep working. And so senior year rolls around, and I'm like, okay, applying to different studios, and trying to figure out like, you know, oh, this studio does not-for-profit work, and this studio does this. And it's like, they all kind of don't fit. And a really good friend of mine, a really good friend of my mom's, excuse me, reached out to me. She was my brother's violin teacher, and she also was a part of the Lake County Orchestra. And she's like, hey, like, we really need someone to do our playbill for the year. And I was like, oh, well, I don't really do that, but I do layout stuff. Like, I guess you can pay me and we can kind of like figure it out. And she's like, yeah, like, would you be a freelancer? And I was like, well, I am in a freelance class, so sure, let's try it out.
Yeah.
And I was able to come alongside her and learn not only why she played the violin, but why she saw it as a ministry, why she decided to join the orchestra, why she loved on her community, and how like I could show her story, the orchestra story, through this one piece of art that was seemingly like, you know, people would pick it up and maybe not ever look at it, but if they really looked at it, I could be a way to tell that story. And it's really cool. And so I did it for her, and I was like, okay, this is kind of nice. Like, I kind of like that. Like, but could I freelance full time by myself? Like, is that like actually a thing? So then I went into my internship, which was with a company, and the director of the studio was like, hey, like, do you do freelance on the side? Like, I have some gigs that isn't quite for our studio. So I started doing more and more things like that. And then I started freelancing for Mosaic Ministries. And so I actually started having a ton of clients. And even
Wow.
then, God was saying like, yes, this is something you can do full time.
Wow.
But I was like, okay, well, like, still, this is on the sideline. Long story short, because I can run off, you know me, I can run off
Oh,
the mouth. But long story short, I left that studio and I went into higher ed, which is where we became like, you know, really close. And I was still doing freelance, but it was to the point where I was being drained trying to continue at that point I started my business, but was drained trying to start my business and still hold on to my safety net of a part-time job. And I was like, God, like, I literally was wrestling with God. I was like, God, like, you told me you wanted me to, you know, start a company, freelance and start a company, and I'm still struggling. So like, what are you trying to say? And God literally, like, as I'm praying and fasting about like what I should do, he's like, I literally told you to just trust me and do this. And I'm like, and I'm doing it. And he's like, and what are you holding on to? And I'm like, oh, I'm holding on to the safety net and the control of consistent income, which is
Mm,
my part-time job. And he's like, you're holding on to, something that's holding you back. And
mm,
yeah, and so yeah, I just had to let that go and do completely full time. I was doing part time design and part time at Trinity, but I needed to do full time design, and I took a leap of faith, and God showed up in mighty ways that I can not even begin to express. But it was just a
wow.
long process. It was a long, long process of trusting Him, of realizing that I was kind of a little bit of a control person, and like really needed to surrender that to the Lord. And um, yeah, because it was crazy. It was crazy when I was like turning down design jobs so that I could like keep my job that I felt like was good and life giving, but it wasn't my calling. It wasn't what I felt like God had for me in that season. And I
Mm,
was rejecting what he had for me, rejecting what he clearly told me was what he wanted me to do so that I could, feel safe, quote unquote. And
wow.
yeah, so God's like, you're not called to be safe. Like you're called to do what I told you to do. So,
Mm, mhm, mhm. This is so good. You said God is like, you're not called to be safe, you're called to do what I called you to do. And I think that's so good. And like there are like so many people I feel like who could be listening to this where God could be inviting them into a space of just the unknown and the unfamiliar.
mm-hmm.
It can be really scary. And you mentioned like that, you were praying and fasting and like I remember those times we would have those conversations. And I just admire just your continual like seeking of the Lord. And you like you there like you said this, there was wrestling in that space, but like now on the other side you can see just all the fruit and like so much fruit like to come.
Mm-hmm.
I just yeah, I'm so excited for your artwork. And one of the blessings that I feel like I was given while at Trinity was you and Evan redesigned like the office
Oh
space
yeah. It was
that I
so
worked
fun.
in.
Yes.
Yeah, it was such a blessing. And when I would come in and out of the office, I would see this piece of artwork that really inspired me. All of your artwork inspires me genuinely. But
Oh,
this
thank
one piece, it's called Fully Free. And I would love for you to just kind of show our audience a smaller version of that so they could just see. And
you.
yeah, tell us what inspired it and all of those things. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So I will kind of put this in view, hopefully you're able to
Yeah.
see. Yes.
Yes.
And then I'll describe it for the podcasters who are just listening. So it is a woman who is fully freed. And so she's an African American woman, and she is adorned with a necklace that is broken chains. And her hair is fully let out. And then she has like highlights of all these different warm tones in her hair. And then
Wow.
she's also clothed with like just layers of colors. And that's kind of like the colors of life. And this piece is so, so cool and like meaningful to me in so many different ways because like I truly believe that like God, at least for me as an artist, God like allows me to be still and like hear the Holy Spirit for inspiration with my art. And
Mm.
like that doesn't always happen. I'm not like, oh my gosh, I wake up in the middle of the night, like, oh God told me to like do this, da, 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 da. Like
Yeah.
rarely ever. but this piece is actually I call it the sister of another piece that I really wanted to enter into a competition for Martin Luther King Day. And they were saying like, what has Martin Luther King inspired you to, and like, all these things. And I genuinely, Leslie, you know me, I'm a procrastinator. I waited till like the last minute. I was like, but I'm like, but I want to finish this piece. I want to put it in. And so I just was surrendered. I'm like, Lord, I have like 48 hours. I have a really good concept. I've started, but I'm nowhere near finished. And I just like prayed through the process, and I really feel like God like led me to create the series of then the Fully Free series. And so there's two pieces that's connected. The first one is a woman, and it's the fully freed person, but she's cut in half, and
Mm,
the her one of her sides is completely grayed out. And it
mm,
came from me talking to the women in my life who have inspired me um, to not only walk in freedom, but walk in my faith and walk in the freedom that Christ gives. Um,
mm,
And so I talked to these women. I said, what does it look like when you're not walking in freedom? And what does it look like when you're walking in freedom? And they gave me so many different adjectives and all these things. But the not walking in freedom was that they felt chained, they felt heavy, they
Mm.
felt muted. And so the woman that I depicted on the one side, the grayed out side, her hair's pulled back. She's like, you know, like the really tight bun. She has her mouth closed. She has chain earrings on, and it's just great. She's just still. But
Wow.
then I'm like, what does it feel like when you're fully free? And they're like, they're giving me descriptions of, they're saying it's when you know that your freedom is not dependent on you, it is dependent on what Jesus Christ did on the cross, and you walk
Mhm.
in that truth. And so I wanted to depict that. I'm like, how do you depict that? And so many of them, I was like, because I'm surrounded by very vibrant women who just love to be expressive. They're like, girl, like let your hair down and like let it flow in the wind. Like
Yeah.
just be free and like let your curls go. And so I depicted the other side, with just colorful hair and just exactly what I described. Her chains are now broken. And then in the
Mm.
background behind her, I wrote out a ton of times, like, and you will know, John 8:32, and it's like, and the truth will set you free, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And it's when
Mm.
Jesus is talking to the Jews that believe this, like when you are abide in my word, then you'll know the truth, and that truth will set you free. And so it's saying to know the truth of your identity as a woman in Christ, and to let not even your own insecurities change that. That's when you're truly free, and you
Mm.
rely on that in Jesus Christ. And so I love that piece. I entered that piece. It placed, and it was really awesome. And then it went on to be in a few different magazines, which was crazy because I was like, I mean, it's kind of one of the times in my art really, I did this earlier in my career. So it's one of the times in my art really got to speak for itself. So that was really exciting for me. Um, but then I had someone approach me and they're like, I love this, but I feel like because it's split, like, I don't know, like, is she really fully free? And I was like,
Mm.
well, of course she is. Like, that's just showing her past. Like, you gotta know your past to get to your future. But it inspired me, and I'm like, okay, but like, I want to depict her fully free. So then I finished the rest of the piece, and that's what the fully free is. And it's just her being fully free. The whole canvas is full of color and life, and her hands are up, and she's praising God. Her mouth is open because she's not muted by the world or her own insecurities anymore. And it's just one of my favorite pieces. And so I love when people are like, oh, like, what does this mean? I'm like, let me tell you. Yeah, it's just so excited that you connected with that one. But yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible, and I think this is my first time hearing, like, the full story, and so I'm
Hmm.
so excited, to hear, like, the process of how that came to be, and what's really cool is I think you mentioned your grandfather would
Hmm.
evangelize,
Yeah,
artwork, and so it's so, like, cool to hear you doing that same thing and how God has, like, crafted you and your identity in Him. And yeah, so can we, like, buy this piece? Like, how can, our
yes.
listeners be
Yes,
like,
you can.
right? How can we
um,
support your artwork? Yeah.
yeah, so you can actually just go onto my Instagram, and I have a link there that you can go to my profile, or you can just DM me on my Instagram and say, hey, like, I want to buy your fully free piece. And I ship them all out. My website, I'm working on getting the link fully where you can just click on it and buy it and not have to talk to me. But there is this human element. So in the
Yes.
meantime, yeah, please DM me, reach out, and just ask to buy it. Um, and then I'll give you, all the different sizes. I have it in canvas and all different sizes. I also do greeting cards, just because if you want to send a woman in your life something encouraging, or a man in your life something encouraging, and you want this to be the cover, like, that's one of the coolest things to me. So yeah.
Oh, yes. I love those greeting cards idea.
Hmm. Thanks.
Okay, 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 okay. I'm like, I need to, like, go buy some stuff. So Ali, for our listeners who, are thinking about taking that next step, like, what would be, kind of just like, your final word of encouragement to them as they're, some people may be artists, some people just may have an idea that they feel like they know,
Hmm.
like, the Holy Spirit is nudging them to kind of take that next step of faith on. What would be your encouragement to them in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. My encouragement would be to start with the small acts of faith, and
Mm.
then grow into the big act of faith, because
Mhm.
starting your own business, taking that leap of faith, it's going to feel so daunting. And it's gonna feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this, like your knees shaking kind of moment. But if you start with the small, it will feel less. It feels like you're chipping away at that big daunting thing, because I think it starts with you taking a day off of work and trusting God for that one day of work to
Mm,
get along with Him and fast and pray. Like that.
mm,
That's how small it started for me. I'm like, can I afford to take one day off work? Can I, like, will my boss be mad? But it was like, no, I'm going to take a day off and I'm going to pray about it, and then take another step and be bold enough to pray to God about it. Because I think sometimes when we say it out loud, it almost feels like we don't deserve it. It's like, I mean, I
mm,
remember like actually going to God with a little bit of fear, saying like, God, I want to start my own business. I want to do art, and then kind of being like, is that okay? Like, being like, I don't know. Like, is
yeah.
this something? But I think with each step, like, you get a little bit closer to God's bosom. You get a little bit closer to His heartbeat. And there's things in my business that I felt the heartbeat say like, okay, now that you're hearing me, I don't want you to fully do that. I want it to look like this, and be like, okay, I hear you there. And then, putting in the 2 weeks notice and being like, hey, like for me, it wasn't even that. For me, it was telling my boss that I was thinking about leaving.
Yeah.
And then it was like, how do you feel about that? Like, I really feel like this is God's will. And then putting in the 2 weeks notice. And then
Mhm.
also, I truly, for those people who are like kind of in the middle, where they've quit the job and they have an application for another job already in, like, to stay faithful, because that's hard too. Is to say, like, give yourself grace to say, I just quit my job and I need a week to just rest, and I'm going to trust that God's going to provide it. And that sounds crazy. It's like, you just quit your job, how are you going to take a week off? Like, refocus and get with God, and then just stay
Mhm.
consistent. And also, get around other people who will pray with you. Leslie, I remember how, like, influential it was for you to be like, I mean, just those small things of like, you should do it. I'm like, wait, really? Like, I mean, just to know that, like, this isn't the craziest ideal in the world, and like, you're not doing something that is never been done before. Like, there are a lot of beautiful entrepreneurs out there who are, leaning into it, and just people who, are doing podcasts and will invite you into their space, and like, be business buddies, and just get around people who will encourage you to know that this is doable.
Mhm.
And I think that's super helpful. I mean, I went to conferences actually. I went to a Life Surge, which is this great conference for Christian entrepreneurs and Christian business owners. And Priscilla Shire spoke. Wow, I hope I didn't say her name, butcher her name on your podcast, but she
Oh,
spoke, and she it was so cool because she talked about getting out the boat. She talked about getting out the boat, and how um, it was when Jesus was meeting Peter for the first time, and he was like, "Get out the boat and, like, grab the fish." And she was saying sometimes it's so hard to get out of our boat of comfort, our boat of
mm,
um, normalization, and just like, this is the normal way to do it, is that everyone has to go get a 9 to 5. And I mean, honestly, like, a 9 to 5 could be exactly where God wants you, but if you're having this tug, I think
yeah.
the biggest encouragement that I can give you is to just take one day, trust God for one day, take it off and be with Him. Don't take it
Mhm.
off and have the movie night Netflix, binge that you've been wanting. I know that's very tempting, but take it off and like, take it off, truly spend it with Him. But
Mhm.
then, like, tell people you're doing it. Like, I remember telling my mom and telling other people, like, hey, I'm taking this day off so
Mm.
that I can hear from God about a business. And I wasn't like, oh, I want to hear from God about this business to see
Yeah.
if this is a risk that I need to take for His kingdom.
Mm.
And I mean, I was lucky enough to know they prayed into it. Yeah. So find those people, stay encouraged, and just take it piece by piece. That's my advice.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I told y'all, Allie is amazing. And um just that encouragement to really to be with God, to get away with God and to launch out into the deep. I feel like that is a whole word by itself. And so I just encourage all of our listeners to really yeah, to listen to what Allie has said. I know I'm listening. I know that we can love our boats of comfort, but the Lord could be calling us, it is calling us deeper. And so,
Mhm.
Allie, I thank you so much for
Oh,
being on
thank
this
you.
podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, I'm so excited. And, she just dropped so much wisdom like it wasn't nothing, like, um, We can be really silly. Okay, so let
Yeah.
me be. But listeners, thank you so much for being with us during this time. You all can find Allie. What's your Instagram?
It's Allery Designs.
Allie Ray Designs. You can find her website there, and please support, support, support. She's a Black woman entrepreneur, full time, and her work is incredible, and it is just so much quality there, and so much, as you can see, intentionality. And we need to support our Christian Black brothers and sisters. And so I'm so excited to know her and to know her work. And so, Allie, thank you so much for being here, and we will
Yes,
see
anytime.
you. Yeah, we will see you next time. All right, bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.